So we'll get started as people enter in. So first thing I always like to do is thank our sponsors, which is Pro Photo Daily, Archive Magazine, Epson Printers, American Photography, Photo Shelter. Also, so everyone knows, we will mute everyone. If you want to, you have a question, you can put it in the chat room or raise your hand. We'll get to you after each presentation. I ask everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Projections NYC. And tonight we have three great presenters. Donna has already fired up the crowd, so that's good, as only Donna can. So we have Donna Ferrato, we have Karen Zusman, and we're starting off with our friend, Alyssa Meadows. So it's all yours, Alyssa.
Okay, so let me get my screen share going. This should be the right. Jay, tell me if it's the right one or if we got to play. Like, oh, that does not look like the right one. Let me try that again. Where's the one that I want? This one? Why is it doing it?
Not quite.
We tested this before we started and it worked just fine. Now it wants to be uncooperative always. So maybe it's this one.
Nope.
I'm sorry, guys.
Take your time, it's fine.
I'm just trying to figure out why it's not, because we had it before. Because it's just trying to give me the big one. Yeah, why is it? See, this is going to do the, yeah, that's the full thing, and that's not how I want to do it, because it's going to mess me up. Hold on. Let me just quit this first. I don't know why the window's not working now, but let me do it again. Share. I don't understand why it's not letting me do it the way we did it before when no one was. I guess we're just gonna have to see, this messes me all up.
Well, so what you can do is before you click on share, there's a button on the Zoom window that says view, right? It usually says speaker, gallery, or immersive. Just what you can do is you could change the view, then do a share, and you'd still be able to see us.
Wait,
So
but I have other, well, see, I want to have that side window open so that I can read.
So click
what
on
I
gallery
wrote.
instead of speaker.
Okay, I have it on gallery already.
Yep. So what you can once you have it in gallery, hold on a second here.
Maybe I have to minimize that so that I don't.
Can't pop it out.
See, it's not. See, it's not showing the same option it showed before. I don't know why it would disappear though. That's what doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So you have the window open and the second window open, and
Yeah,
you're not
that's what
able
I'm
to
saying.
select that window when you share.
Now it's not giving me it as an option. I'm like, where did it go? We had it before.
You try closing all your windows for Lightroom except try doing you leave two, just the two open.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else. Hold on, let me just. Frank, make small talk for 2 seconds while I get this squared away.
So the Rangers play tomorrow, big game tomorrow. Series is tied 2-2. Tomorrow's a big winning the third game is going to be big, but it's away. I feel like Ed McMahon. Got to be old enough to remember Ed McMahon filling in time. You had it all. It was like all there.
That's what I'm saying. It's not giving, Zoom is not giving me the same option it gave me before. That's the problem. I'm like, that's why I don't understand how to fix it.
Alyssa, if you just share your screen just to do the whole, if you put up the Lightroom program or whatever you want to show and you just do share screen, then you don't have to pick a window.
It's still making me pick. See, I had this just selected before and now it won't let me select that. That's why I don't know.
Try closing that window and opening it again.
There. Is this
Okay,
is this
here
how
we
it
go.
looked
Perfect.
before? Okay, I fixed it. I don't know how I fixed it, but I fixed it.
Don't worry,
Thank
Alyssa.
you,
We'll edit this
Karen.
part out when we put it on the internet.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now let me get myself back unflustered from that confusion for a second. Okay, so I wanted to start with this. Okay, there we go. We'll just do it this way. I don't know why it doesn't have the secondary display there anymore. There we go. That's how I wanted it to show. Okay. So I did not ask to be born into this body. I think the first place we need to start with this conversation is we're always so busy talking about how women's bodies need to be policed. And the fact of the matter is none of us asked for this. We didn't have a say in whether or not we were the ones that carry the responsibility for both parties when it comes to sexual interactions. And there, okay, yeah, it stays there. Okay. And I just want to start the conversation a little bit because I think there's a big misconception around women and not taking that responsibility seriously. And just in my firsthand experience since the age of 15, I knew that I didn't want to have children. That was never a question in my mind. I always knew that from the start. And so I always took that responsibility very seriously. And even in spite of that, I've been confronted with that fear multiple times. The first time was when I went to the doctor and I realized at 17 that a lot of birth control options weren't even available to me because of pre-existing conditions that would have resulted in additional health risks. So the three most common being the pill, the patch, and the ring were completely not on the table for me in the first place, leaving me with only an IUD or Depo-Provera. Then confronting the reality of Depo-Provera is that that's a shot that you have to take quarterly every year. That's extremely painful, that they don't recommend you take for more than 2 years because it's so severe on a woman's body that it actually leaches calcium from your bones and you have to take a calcium supplement while on it. So then at 18 and at 21, I was raped the first time and had to go to Planned Parenthood, where they had to make sure that I wasn't pregnant because I wasn't sure if the man who assaulted me had stealthed me, which for those of you who don't know, stealthing is a term within the community of when a man takes the condom off without you knowing the condom's been removed. And because I was inebriated, I don't know if he used one or not. And Planned Parenthood was the only reason I was able to go and get medical treatment and make sure that I wasn't pregnant. And then at 22, I had to change gynecologists just to get a doctor who would give me an IUD, because IUDs are something very difficult for women who haven't had children. You know, it's difficult for us to get because doctors say that you should have children before, at least old school doctors. Newer gynecologists are a little better about this, but old school gynecologists say that unless you have already had children, you shouldn't have an IUD. So I had to actually change doctors to even get the other birth control option that's even available to me. Then when I was 28 and in a committed monogamous relationship where there was no risk of pregnancy, the IUD I had tore through the back of my cervix without my knowledge, leaving me completely vulnerable to getting pregnant, despite having something that was supposed to be 99% effective in a relationship that should have been secure enough to not worry about an accidental pregnancy. And then when I was 21 or 31, I'm skipping a line. When I was 29, I had a partner that I asked to get a vasectomy and he adamantly declined. And when I confronted him about why, he told me because he just didn't want to, even though I was in crippling pain from the IUD and having some really serious issues because of it. And then when I was 31, I went to my doctor to talk to her about tubal ligation, and she wouldn't even have the conversation with me in the first place. She told me that I was too young and that I might change my mind, even though I was 31, and that we could talk about it in a year or two. And then at 32, I believe I saw Annalise in here, I only learned through a friend instead of a doctor about the treatment called endometrial ablation, which is not specifically for abortion, or for birth control, but can specifically be used in that methodology. And the fact that I had to learn that through the internet and a friend instead of from a doctor says a lot about the options available to women. And all of this is in light of the fact that there is a very simple male birth control on the market, just not here in the United States. It's available in other countries. I discovered it in 2012, and it is a gel that gets inserted into the vas deferens tube, and it stays there until you flush it out with water. So it's very easy to remove, has no adverse side effects, and it works by breaking off the tails of the sperm when they go through the vas deferens tube, rendering any ejaculate completely, inoculated from actually causing pregnancy. So I discovered that in 2012. It's still not available here, even though it's been in existence for a decade now. So just to put into context, there have been more than 1,100 restrictions on abortion that have been added since Roe v. Wade was put into place in 1973. And those restrictions look like waiting periods, anti-abortion counseling mandates, bans on the type of procedure used, whether it's the pill, surgical, there are different forms of abortion available to women, and also forced ultrasounds, which a lot of us in the feminist community call state-sanctioned rape, because we can't, we don't want, it's a vaginal ultrasound that is literally penetrating you, that you have to consent to if you want to be able to get an abortion. So these are just some of the things I wanted to preface us to, and I may be a white woman, but I want to acknowledge that abortion restrictions, due to these various restriction laws that are put in place, have a much greater impact on minority communities, women of color, and poor communities, because when you are not having the best financial support, having to wait 48 or 72 hours to be able to get a procedure is the difference between having your job or not. Having to drive 300, 400, 500 miles to get one is a cost prohibitive measure that doesn't allow you to actually get an abortion if you're not financially viable that way. So these are just some of the realities of the abortion process and the challenges women face within them. And so, I just wanted to share basically what I've done in the last 6 months has been going around to, it started with Texas, going to the clinics there that were getting shut down. This is one that was outside of El Paso that was already gone when I got there. This is just the evidence of it. And then, because this was at the time when it was just Texas's law. And then while I was on the road this last month was when the SCOTUS ruling broke. And so I began going to all the clinics along the southern states on my way home. So I went to Mississippi, Louisiana, Tennessee, more Texas and Austin. And I'm starting with the spaces. It was a little hard to figure out how to flow everything. So we're going to start with the clinics themselves and the intimidation tactics that women experience when they're going there, and then move into the spaces themselves and the protesters. So I just thought it was very interesting that women, even though this is supposed to be very blatant right, we should all have, just going there and trying to get into the space is greatly intimidating, feels very threatening, all these barriers, all these fences. And then juxtaposed with these scenic waiting areas as if it somehow feels safe to be in these spaces despite all these barriers to entry.
And do they have security people out in front as well? Like a guard at the door and that kind of stuff too, Alyssa?
Yeah, there are clinic escorts, which I will have some photos of later. Just to clarify, this was an interesting juxtaposition to me of these very threatening environments, but at the same time, they try to make it inviting to the women by having, these, flowers and garden areas. And it's this, I don't know if that connection makes sense to you, but to me, it was very much the juxtaposition of trying to be open and inviting while also having these very confronting, threatening signs surrounding you everywhere. And there's some of the security cameras. I didn't see any security guards, but there are clinic escorts and there's signage everywhere. I also was at the clinics on off hours sometimes, so I can't speak to what it's like when they're open versus when I was there. And this particular clinic I thought was really interesting because it's genuinely built like an old school castle moat environment. It has this bridge that you have to walk across that has the gated fence, while there's literally a body of water, like a small stream that runs the entire length of the property, separating the parking lot from the building itself. So it's very evident that these spaces are fortified in a way that no other medical space needs to be. So even though it's meant to be a space for women, it doesn't get to be a space of comfort and ease and privacy. It feels very threatening and invasive, and you're very aware of how unsafe an environment this can be, even though it's something that's supposed to be within your personal medical privacy.
So what is, because I guess like those security things, the cameras and the fences are to keep the bad people who are protesting, who don't want people to get abortions, to keep them away, and and to make women but you don't feel safer going in, right? It works both ways to be intimidating.
Yeah, exactly. It's for the safety of the staff, because through talking through clinic escorts at the Mississippi location, there have been murder threats, there have been death threats, the certain doctors that said they were going to start providing abortions, protesters took photos of their license plates and they said, never mind, we can't do this because we're going to get killed. Which is very ironic considering this is the pro-life movement that's, perpetuating this. So, and just to see this kind of signage when you are supposed to be in a space where it's like a conversation between you and your doctor, it's a very unnerving, because you can I've always been aware that this is the reality of what an abortion clinic is like. I've never had to go personally, but I've, through film portrayals and everything. But even seeing it firsthand was very confronting of just how severe and how, just the levels of precaution they have to take to ensure that this service is even available. And a lot of them you have to get buzzed in. It's not like you can just go in and make an appointment by walking in. You have to, have an appointment in advance, get buzzed in, go through the various security measures. And what's also happening that I found upsettingly interesting was when I was in Louisiana and I talked to one of the nurses there, she explained to me that they were getting a lot of the Texas women. And then when I talked to the Mississippi clinic escort, she told me that they were getting a lot of the Louisiana women. So these laws in these various states are not actually changing that women are getting the procedure. It's changing how far you have to go to get it, because there's basically this cascade effect of Texas is pushing out to Louisiana, Louisiana pushing out to Mississippi, and it's just, going to keep going if we don't stop this erosion of rights.
And it appears that these locations are all sort of outside the city central, right? I mean, it's a little bit countryside.
It's a little hard for me to gauge because,
Here's
I'm
Mississippi.
not super familiar with the cities, and also coming from New York, every city that's not New York or Chicago or LA or Miami feels kind of small in comparison. And, they are more spread out. The Austin one was right off a highway, even though it seems very scenic. And this is the other Austin one that was also right off major transit area. So. And then this was the New Mexico clinic that I went to after the El Paso one. And I thought it was very brave that the doctor actually has their name on the door, because that was the only location that I saw that.
Right. Well. And do you get questioned as a photographer? What are you doing there? Why are you here? That kind of
Oh,
stuff?
I was attacked immediately every time I got there. It was pretty instantaneous that they asked me, what are you here for? Which publication are you with? And as soon as they got even a hint of, I'm not on your team, it was, I'm a sinner, I'm a slut, I'm going to hell. I was explicitly told that I should be willing to lay my life down for a baby, just flat out, like just be willing to throw it all right out the window for a fetus. Because when I tried to explain the whole, I could have accidentally had a pregnancy with that IUD issue I had, it became a debate of how I should have, just if I would get pregnant, I should just die. if it becomes life endangering, I should just die. And that was a very upsetting, confronting thing to hear and see. these were probably some of the most, now we're getting into the people. This was part of the, I don't know if you can tell that it says me, still me. It was a little hard because it was high up and the wind was blowing. But it's very much these subtle little things at all the clinics that even if the protesters aren't there, you know that they were there, and it continues that sense of ease and lack of safety, because there are all these little hints of like, make a different decision and not respecting the woman's right to make a choice. And then this is one tactic some of the protesters use. They literally put speakers outside the clinic because there are clinic escorts that stop them from going beyond, I think, going beyond the wall and the property lines. And so they will set up megaphones and, play Christian gospel music while screaming at them in the microphone about how they're murdering babies. So that was one I wasn't expecting to see. And you can see how they tried to take away the pro-choice things while also putting their own communication down. And this woman, what I thought was really interesting was how performative a lot of these protesters have been. I've noticed behavioral changes when they see me with the camera. This woman was just standing across the street, not doing anything. And as soon as I turned my camera on her and she realized I was taking pictures of her, she got down on one knee and, started being very dramatic with it. This is the only clinic in Mississippi, and this is one of the clinic escorts helping a truck get out. And these men here told me I needed to use, they were very disparaging and talked to me about my woman voice, because apparently I don't just have a voice, it's a woman voice. It needs to be gender identified as a woman voice. So it very much shows their mentality and their attitude. And this is the guy that was using the megaphone, and he's got his little earpiece on so that he can project his voice through the speaker. But his privacy is very important, and he didn't like that I was taking his photo. So he got his sign to hide his face.
Alyssa, any common denominator with the different protesters when you go from state to state or city to city? Anything like?
Yeah, mostly white men. That's
White
the common denominator. White men. I don't see men of color. I don't see women of color. I see a couple white women and none of them are young.
And why do you think that is?
Because they're using religion as a justification for this, even though it doesn't track with what they speak to.
No, but why do you think there's no minorities?
Because this is an issue that affects minority women more than white women. I mean, let's be real, white women, due to privilege and accessibility, even with abortion being, more cost prohibitive or limited availability, depending on where you are in the country, by and large, we're still going to be able to find ways to get them, or, go to states where we can have access to them. Whereas Black women, women of color, poor women, which unfortunately those demographics often overlap depending on what part of the country you're in, they're disproportionately affected by this issue. And that's why it's such a big issue overall, because when women are in poverty and trying to get out of it, the costs of a pregnancy and subsequently that child for another 18 years is the difference between staying in poverty or getting out of poverty. So, in my opinion, this is very much motivated by keeping people in their place by white, racist, sexist people. That's my opinion. You can disagree with it. But that's my perspective, because what I've noticed is all the people protesting have never had to face this reality for the most part. Like I said, a few women here and there, but it's all white men. And it's like, you're not ever going to have to make this decision. And this is how they come right up to the cars. Like, you almost have to run them over to get into the clinic. I almost did. Like they do not respect the vehicle space. And you can see they block the whole entrance. They make it that you have to drive through them. And they're laughing while they're doing this. In my opinion, this is why I don't buy them and what they're selling at all. Because if you genuinely were really concerned about these unborn fetuses and these lives, as they claim them to be, you would think there would be sincerity and honesty and sadness, not this sick, twisted pleasure at harassing women because they're smiling while they're doing it a lot of the time, as instanced by this man. You know, it very much feels like a power play and a game with these protesters. They were not interested in having conversations. They were more interested in double talk and talking over and interrupting, asking questions to interrupt, so that when you start to answer, they interrupt you again. So you never get a full thought out. You can never have a dialogue, a back and forth. And they try to logic double think you into being like, oh, so you think it's a problem to identify gender, and like try to, it's like this weird logic game that they like to play. And this man in particular really enjoyed doing it. You can see it in his smirk.
And did you feel personally threatened?
Oh, I got hurt. I have photos of it for later. Yeah, not majorly, but yeah. I had a knife on me the whole time, and I had a hatchet in my car just in case. But yeah, it didn't feel safe. I mean, I was the one guy made fun of me. This guy, in fact, made fun of me for shaking because I was upset and scared, you know, going to this, not knowing what they were going to do to me. I'm the only pro-choice person there with, you know, a bunch of older white guys that clearly don't see me as an equal human being. So it's very unnerving and a very unsafe space to be in. And then to also see the way they're indoctrinating their children, like they are bringing their kids to this, putting them in these shirts. These children don't even understand. This is not a space for kids to even be in. This is between a woman and her doctor. And if you don't agree, then don't get one, is really what it boils down to.
And you're right. I mean, you're 6 feet away from these folks.
I use my camera as a form of payback personally. If you're going to come harass women outside the clinic, I'm going to get my camera as in your face as I can and harass you right back. That is very much my attitude. If you're going to be here and not respect these women's privacy, I'm going to use my, you know, privilege of the press and, you know, public sphere to be as annoying and frustrating and intimidating right back. So, not with this guy on, but some of the other portraits later, they're actually shot on like 16 millimeter, and I'm like this far from their face, and they don't like it. It's very interesting how they think they're entitled to it, but they don't like it. This guy had an attitude of take his hat off and bow to me, you know, that nice little, let me give you some sass. And then you can see this is basically demonstrating the clinic line of the clinic escorts stand on the gate entrance, and these guys get as close as they can without crossing the line. And it, to me, it's just very indicative of the experience being here. This is one of the other Baton Rouge clinic protesters, as is him. And this is what I mean, all old white guys and young white guys. And then this was, you could tell the daughter didn't want to be there. I shouldn't speak for her, so I won't say more than that, but she, at no point did it seem like she understood what she was there for. It felt very much like she was being pressured to be there. And her mom was reciting, you know, prayer after prayer, and she just went along with it. I don't know, I can't speak to whether or not my camera was part of what made her uncomfortable, but to me, it was very evident she didn't understand fully what she was protesting, and she couldn't have been more than 16, 17. And this is one of the cars coming into the clinic. And this is what they also did. They made it a game of whether or not I could get photos. They would use their signage to bump me, push me, block my camera. That's ultimately how I did get hurt this day with the one protester. And then this woman, you know, she was initially avoiding my camera and hiding her face, which it just cracks me up when these people come out and are protesting women having their privacy and right to make a medical choice, but then try to hide their faces from me, because this is a consistent pattern as well. But once she realized I wasn't going to let her get away with it, she got attitudinal and started taunting me and was like, oh, and when I said her hand is only this far from my lens in this is actually with a fisheye lens that I corrected. So they really pushed their perspective. And then this is the man that told me I should just be willing to die. He's the one that told me I was a Satan worshiper. He was a very vitriolic. And when I was speaking to this
What
group,
state are we in?
this is all, these ones, she's Baton Rouge, he's Baton Rouge. This is all Baton Rouge, I think for a little bit. But what's really ironic is that woman in the background holding her phone, she's actually had 2 abortions. She changed her mind on the 3rd one and now prevents other women from making the same choices because that's not hypocritical at all. So it was pretty much these 3 men that were harassing me at that Baton Rouge clinic. And then this woman, what was probably one of the most upsetting, confronting moments was this woman was talking about how she survived 3 ectopic pregnancies, which I'm glad she did, but she's lucky. Proceeded to tell me how abortion is so much more dangerous than actually carrying a pregnancy, which is not remotely true. Pregnancy is a much higher risk to women's livelihood. The maternal mortality rate in our country is abysmal, and has been steadily dropping and correlates with dropping in states that have restrictive abortion access, and birth control access. So that says a lot. But while I was, talking to her, that preacher man from before interrupted me, and I turned to him and I said, "Excuse me, I'm pretty sure I wasn't speaking to you. I'm pretty sure she and I were having a conversation," because he had interrupted me at least 6 or 7 times. I was done with him interrupting me, and I checked him, and both the women, this woman and the woman who had the abortions, both interrupted me then to be like, no, he's the man. We listen to him. And that's what was probably the most unnerving, is that this woman, along with the other woman, really believe they are secondary to men. They believe that we are subservient and second-class citizens in comparison. And it was very upsetting to see that the only women that are protesting are ones that truly don't see themselves as equal. And I knew that existed, but I'd never met a woman that actually, like, the sincerity of their statement when they said, no, he's the man. We stopped speaking to listen to him, was very like, whoa, this is a totally different world down here.
As you continue this project, do you think getting some video?
I do have audio. I wanted to include that tonight, but I didn't have time to go through it all once I finally got all the images together. I haven't decided whether or not video will be brought into it. If I do, I think I'll try to have it be subtle and hidden. I don't think I'd want them. They seem to enjoy having attention, so I don't want to know that they're getting more attention than they deserve. But I think it might come in down the road when I speak to, I haven't talked to any women yet that have come out of the clinics. I don't want to bother anyone making that choice. I'm working with getting in touch with the clinics right now so that they can give my information to women who want to speak, so that I can only talk to, willing participants and not further traumatize any of the women going to the clinics.
Makes sense.
And then this is one of the women that was at the clinic to make a decision, and I watched them harass her quite heavily, give her a hard time. And then this was one of the guys that decided to hide his face. And then it was just very interesting to me that there was this consistent theology represented throughout, as if there isn't a separation of church and state in this country. And then this guy, I thought his pamphlet was very inappropriate for this space. not really warranted in this environment, but important to document as where they're coming from with thinking this is an equal decision when it's not, because until a man can carry a pregnancy to term, it's not the same. It's never going to be the same. Even if we find a way to create technology where pregnancies can be outside of a woman's body, it's still not going to allow men the same experience. So I don't personally share this man's opinion, but I thought it was important to show that this is where they come from with their mentality. And then that was my minor injury, but I got cut with a sign when they were blocking. And you know, it was only because I stopped trying that it didn't escalate further. But it's, you know, they'll hurt you even if they can, you know. It's they definitely don't treat women as equals. And I knew that was the reality of it, but it was another thing to experience it firsthand and see how severe the degree of sexism and misogyny is in these communities. So yeah, that's what we've got.
Right, really, I mean, powerful work, and your commentary is terrific. I have to say, you really put it in. You really gives us context.
I appreciate that. I felt like I was a little stumbly, but I'm glad you think so.
No, it is. And so, how do you continue?
I think the next steps are going to be doing more of the Northeastern clinics, because when I was at the Mississippi clinic, I had a very extensive conversation with the clinic escort there, who was clearly like the head clinic escort. Her name was Diatra. And she explained to me that there is a much larger plan at foot, which, you know, you can say it's conspiracy theorist, but I defer to trusting a woman working on site at a clinic dealing with this stuff every day. And she explained to me that there is a 50-state plan and that they're focused on the southern states right now, but that these religious zealots are, you know, putting, you know, through private Facebook groups, private secret organizing, putting officials and sending people from southern states up to northern states to infiltrate legislation to start eroding it up north next.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Bruce has an interesting question. Can you sense what the difference would be for a male photographer? Would there be a difference?
Oh, absolutely.
Would it be more physical? Would it be more physical or more respectful? What do you think?
I would have a really hard time with a man working on this project because it is not something you can comprehend. You do not know the reality of facing what it is to carry a child when you do. Like, for me, the idea of a baby in my stomach is like telling me I have a tapeworm or that I have an alien chest burster. Those are my comparisons, because that's how much I do not want to have a baby and how much I have prioritized making sure that I never do. But unless you've experienced that real risk and had to go to Planned Parenthood to make sure you weren't pregnant, there are projects that are appropriate for you to do and projects that aren't. And, you know, to put this in the context of, you know, racism, I can't speak to what it's like as a man, but I have white privilege, right? So there are certain stories and photo projects I would like to do that, you know, I don't think are appropriate for me to do as a white person, you know, because I'm not of the Black community. I should not be telling those people's stories. But I use the line in thinking of, is it something that I can do as an ally that a Black person can't do? So one of the projects I work on is this project about sundown towns, where it is, for those of you who don't know, sundown towns are towns where it's not safe for a person of color to be in it after sundown, because if they are, something bad will happen to them. And so that is where I choose to invest my energy to support them, because it's not safe for a Black person to go do that project.
But do you think the protesters would let a male photographer shoot?
Yeah. Oh, they don't. I think they
Bruce.
would definitely give a much more leniency. They wouldn't. I don't think it would be treated like a game the same way it is that I've been experiencing.
Well, that is. And anyone else has any questions? Raise your hand. We could ask questions. But that is powerful work, and like I say, your commentary really gives us context. And we just put Alyssa's Instagram title there, so you have that. And as you progress, we'll do it again. It was terrific, really, really terrific.
And thank you, William. I just saw your comment. Thank you.
All right, so we'll take just a minute, and we'll get Karen up and running. Thank you, Alyssa.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad you were already doing this. For those of you who don't know, I emailed Frank and was like, Frank, you need to do it. And he's like, don't worry, I'm already on it. I was like, yes.
All right, Karen, we'll let you share. We'll get Jay to do that. Okay.
Okay, so should I just go ahead and start?
Yes, tell us the story, Karen.
Yeah. So before I press play, while we're just on this sort of holding slide, when we met, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before yesterday, Alyssa had talked about doing some audio. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. And even though you didn't, it gave me the idea that Frank asked me to present this Superpower of Me project, which I know some of you are familiar with, some of you aren't, but it came out of the Black Lives Matter protests. And recently we were talking to somebody about the work, and they actually found that the BLM photography was actually really important part that led me to the Superpower of Me project. So what I decided to do for this was to play just a 5-minute video. When I did a lot of protest photography, and I did most of it as a member of the Street Riders, which was a weekly bicycle protest group. And I should say, for those of you who don't know me, I am based here in New York City. And so that was a group, we rode through all 5 boroughs, we shut down bridges and highways. And anyway, this photojournalist, some of you may know Carl Just from the Miami Herald, he's a Haitian American photographer, invited me to his photo collective, Iris Photo Collective, to come down and help me edit some of my photos. And then he made a short video of me talking about how the Black Lives Matter work led to the Superpower of Me work. So I'm actually gonna play that 5-minute video, and then I'll go through a few of the images from Black Lives Matter, and then I'll go into the Superpower project.
Beautiful.
So let me just play and hit. I'm Karen Zusman. I go by KZ, and I'm from New York City, Brooklyn. Life was on the streets, and I think, you know, like everywhere, people were so cooped up for the previous few months during lockdown. In New York, we were really locked down. So when the protests started, everybody hit the streets. It was pretty amazing. And I'd never seen police presence like that. I had never seen the crowds like that. People thought people weren't going to come out because of the pandemic, but it wasn't the case. We were all wearing masks. Virus didn't peak, and it was those first few days, it was crazy. There were fires everywhere. Before the looting happened, there was just a lot of police brutality. I remember one time I was near Barclays Center, and the cops started chasing a guy right in front of me with the baton. And then they came at me with a baton as well, and I had my bike and I was trying to shoot, and I tripped over my bike and my leg got caught up on the chain, but it was like there was so much adrenaline. It was such a moment. I couldn't imagine not being there. And then eventually, after curfew, maybe a few days of curfew, the bike protests started happening. So a lot of people that had been blocking the marchers decided to form a bicycle protest group. And this one was called Street Riders. It was the biggest one. And I got really involved with Street Riders. And we had weekly, we called them justice rides. And at the peak, there was maybe 15,000 cyclists. And we were shutting down all the bridges, the highways, the streets. And what was really amazing is every justice ride, we would go into different boroughs. So we were going into the Bronx, we were going into Queens. Sometimes it would take me an hour and a half just to get to the start of the ride on my bike, and then we would ride for like 5 or 6 hours. And it was incredible. And I think for me,
probably went on 10 or 11 justice rides every week, but it was seeing the reactions, especially of the children of color, when they would see this, huge snaking line of bicyclists screaming Black Lives Matter, and how they responded to that. And truthfully, the response was mixed. It wasn't all what you might imagine. Some people had a problem with it because there was probably 60 to 70% white people on these rides, even though the founders were both Black. But we would be riding through these neighborhoods, particularly in the Bronx, I remember, where, these Black lives that we were fighting for could not cross the street and get to work on time because they had to wait for this line of 15,000 cyclists to go through. Then there was another incident where we almost rode over the Black Lives Matter mural that had just painted. So there's always, it was just a really interesting thing to document, but to document it as a writer, I was very invested in it. I mean, there were photographers on the sidelines, but I was on the bike, and it was extraordinary. So there started to be a lot of drama, all kinds of stuff happening in our group and the groups around us. And I just thought, you know what, rather than take sides, who are we fighting for? And that's what I really wanted to focus on. And I go to the beach to swim. That's what I do to just relax. And I started photographing young Black, brown, and immigrant lives because they were at the beach and they were just glorious. These kids were just full of abandon, full of joy. And when I first started posting, the response I was getting on IG was overwhelming. People were so happy and soothed by these images of these children with just the sky. I would isolate them so you couldn't even tell exactly where they were, just the sky. I used birds, clouds, anything that felt symbolic, and to elevate these kids, to really celebrate these lives. And when I first started, the first family I photographed was from Ghana. And I sent the father the pictures, and he wrote me back this amazing email, and he said, thank you so much for giving my kids the proof that they're the superheroes that they really imagine themselves to be. And I got that, and I was like, oh my God, I have to keep going. And so I backed off the protesting for a while to start covering these young Black and brown lives at the beach.
Wow.
So you saw those names there. That was C.W. Griffith and Carl Juice did that for me, which was wonderful. Both prominent Black photographers. They invited me to Miami and we made that. But this is an image that I took before.
Wait, Karen, I just want to ask you something.
Sure.
Like, so the letter, the email from the dad, was that the crystallizing moment that I have to continue this? Like, what got you to this, to the whole superpower of me?
That was exactly it. Like, I was going to talk about that, but you jumped.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Exactly it. No.
That's
I knew
amazing.
that I wanted to celebrate these kids in some way. I knew that I wanted to do my part to sort of counter systemic racism as a photographer. But I also knew that, number one, we were inundated with protest imagery. We were hearing about, after George Floyd, after all the protests, during them, these kids were still getting shot, right? Like this was still happening. And we were just full of that. And I wanted to do something that would counter it, but would be joyful and would be celebratory, because these kids are watching the news too, And I just always wondered, what are these kids thinking? And I'll show some of those photos as I go through. But so this image was taken before the protests. I think it was right when Ahmaud Arbery was shot down. You remember the boy in Georgia, the very young man in Georgia. and I was riding the train to the beach to swim, and I saw this young Black boy looking out at the cemetery. And I just, thought again, what is he thinking, And that was a very somber moment. And I think it's a very somber photograph. But I started doing something different. Here's just a few of the BLM images that you saw in the video. I'll just go through those quickly. This woman became one of the leaders, so that was great. Her name is Junie Francois, and she was very powerful. This is a guy who actually didn't really photograph before the protest. His name is Booty. He became quite amazing photographer, and he covered a lot of the January 6th stuff. And he's famous for climbing things and taking the photos. And I just wanted to show this because I definitely, when I was taking photographs of the police, I made a point to try to talk to people of color, primarily women, cops of color, but also some of the men, because a lot of these people have little Black and brown babies too, and they're not safe, and it's really complex. And I tried to show the complexity. I think there's another image coming up that shows that. This was a Christian group that was protesting during the George Floyd for BLM. I mean, what was also really great about riding with the group was that we got vantage points of the city that you would never normally get, because these areas are only for cars. Like this shot, again, I was paying attention to the women of color police, and this Muslim woman, I saw her from across the street, and I watched her make a beeline. There was a line of women cops, and she just went and kind of held her hand up and blessed each one. So this was going through a part of Brooklyn that's sort of a food desert, and the kids are inside McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, and that's all there is on offer for them. And they were looking at us, and you can see they weren't exactly jumping with elation, whereas in other instances the kids were. They were very elated to hear all these white people scream Black Lives Matter, but here it's a lot more ambiguous. This was up in the Bronx. This little boy watching again, we were, I think at our peak, we were 10, 15,000 cyclists. But again, I just got really, really interested in these children. So yeah, exactly to your point, Frank, that man who is the father of 4, who is from Ghana, I saw them from down the beach. I saw them playing on the abandoned lifeguard stand, and the father was so loving, and just the joy between the father and his kids drew me right to them. So I took some pictures of his kids. I mean, I asked with his permission, of course. And when I sent him the photos, that was what he wrote me back. And it was a long email, and it really, I cried. I think it's an email every photographer would want to receive. It was so moving and taught me, the power of my images to empower, It's one thing to document. And I got into photography. I started documenting human trafficking in Southeast Asia. I was very close to a group of Burmese refugees, and I wasn't a photographer at the time, but that's what brought me to photography. So to flip it and to try to document something, but from a very joyful, positive, celebratory angle, was something I had never done before. And so I felt like this project gave me that. And I started developing a relationship with the families. And what I decided to do is, because I have an MFA in poetry, I wanted to figure out a way to give these kids a platform to use their own voices to talk about their superpowers. So it wouldn't just be my photography, it would be them as well. So I started giving these free poetry workshops to the kids who I had photographed at the beach. And then throughout the winter, I continued working one-on-one through Zoom to make these poems.
Karen?
Yeah.
So when did the superpower of me become part of the kids realizing I have superpower? Right, like, are you, how are you nurturing that idea? Like for images like this and the other beach shot, what are you, inspiring in them to get this?
I explained to them exactly what we're going for. First almost all of these are from chance encounters at the beach. So I don't know these kids. I don't know their parents. And they catch my eye for one reason or another. And I approach the parents and I explain to the parents what I'm doing. And my idea was that I would have an outdoor exhibit at a public park, which I'm doing at the Ronald McNair Park. July 14th is our opening date. And Ronald McNair was he was the second Black astronaut. Unfortunately, he was killed in the space shuttle Challenger. But he has this amazing story where when he was 9 years old in 1959 in the segregated South Carolina, he tried to check out a library book. He wasn't allowed because he was a little Black boy. He said, "I'm not going to leave without my books." They called the police on him. And now that library is named after him. So it was a very symbolic choice to choose that library and to apply for those permits, which we're getting. And to answer your question, that's a bit of a digression, but just some background to sort of crystallize the project. When I approach the kids, after I get permission from the parents, I just start talking to them about, hey, I'm pretty sure you have a superpower, right? And sometimes they'll be like, oh yeah, and they'll just go right into it. Like there was this one girl who just like went into being a starfish. I think I have that image, but she's like, my superpower is I have all the superpowers. And I said, like, give me one. And she just goes on the ground, on the sand, and goes into a starfish. And she says, oh, I can be a starfish anytime I want, And that she was also one of the first. And it just made me realize if you give these kids a chance, they're just full of their own power, in a good way. And sometimes they say, no, I don't have a superpower. And that's always kind of sad to me. So I try to coax it out of them. And usually, almost always, we ended up with something. And then I talk to them and I say, well, listen, we're going to make a poem about your superpower too. And, then we start talking about the poetry. And I guess I should say, I applied for the Leica Women's Photo Project grant for this project. And I received it. And when I received it, that's when I really started thinking about the poetry workshops in earnest and the exhibit in earnest, because I got the grant money and I had their support. And it gave me a lot of confidence too. I mean, I think this night is also about what it means to be a woman photographer, yes, in the age of Roe v. Wade, but just even in a more general sense. And that award celebrates the woman's point of view, the woman's perspective. So I sort of thought, well, I'm shooting Black Lives Matter, and there was a lot of brutality and violence and aggression and testosterone in Black Lives Matter. And then to go into this other direction and work with these children about their superpowers just felt really great to me.
So in a lot of ways, they inspired you to take it to the next space.
100% they inspired me. They're my collaborators. And I tell them that. I I work with them, I spend time with them, and I say, you're my collaborator now. I explain to them what that means. We work on a portrait together, and then we work on a poem together.
Beautiful.
So I'm going to show some portraits and poems in a moment, but she's one of two siblings. They're sisters. They're 1 year apart. Her name is Zaria. Her sister's name is Zamaya. And these are two girls that I've gotten very close to. Their mom is wonderful. She fully supports the project. I mean, let's be frank. I'm white. And originally I was also photographing young immigrants who were not all of color, and other kids of color. It just happened that when I went to get releases and work with the kids on the poems, the families that stuck with me happened to be all kids, you know, from the African diaspora, shall we say. So that's why you're seeing Black kids, Black portraits. And it's been a challenge for me because even as Alyssa was saying earlier, you know, I am not part of this community. I'm very aware of that. But I've had a lot of dialogue with the parents, and the parents really love this project and are very supportive of it. So it's been such a learning curve in so many ways. It's just been such a rich and difficult, you know, and challenging experience. But these girls are a part of my life now, these two little girls. They're so amazing. I will say I'm probably getting more out of this than they are, you know? But some of them just grabbed me at the beach. This one little girl, just like I couldn't walk, she threw herself on me and hugged me so hard. She's like, this is the best day of my life. And I looked at her mom and we looked at each other, and I think, no, the best day of your life is when you're going to see your image, you know, 6 foot by 4 feet on this park with your poem. That's when we're going to have some real empowerment. But I've had very lengthy conversations with not only the parents, some of the aunties as well. And like this little girl's aunt said to me, listen, if you just touch one kid out of all of them, you know, that's enough. Then who cares what color your skin is? This is Yamaya. She's got such an amazing poem. When I told her that we were doing it in Ronald McNair Park, she's 6 years old. She said to me, well, what about Mae Jemison? And I said, Mae Jemison? And me and her mother, it was on a Zoom, looked at each other and we're like, who's Mae Jemison? And she's like, Mae Jemison? She was the first little Black girl to go to space. Don't you know that? And her mother said, well, make sure you know what you're talking about, Yamaya. And I Googled it and she was right. I mean, is this just, the 6-year-olds had the most profound poems. This is Nalo, he's 10. His mother is a dancer. You can see that in him.
So Karen, this ends up becoming a labor of love.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Spent the last 2 years doing it, right? Yeah. And, you know, being able to combine the poetry with it is something that I couldn't have envisioned that I would be doing a few years ago.
And tell us that you didn't bring the birds. I mean, what a perfect, I mean, it's just perfect. I mean, it's, yeah. You got a great producer and, you know, brought in 24 birds to fly around.
Yeah, I wish I had an assistant, a bird whisperer. That would be great.
That would, yeah, a wrangler.
The kids help me with the birds. You know, I tell them, in fact, there's a great story. I'll just go back. This boy, Ken, I said to him, his mother had shown him some of the images. And I said to him, well, what do you want to do for your superpower portrait? And he said, I want to do something with the birds. And I said, like what? And he's like, I don't know. I said, well, maybe you could catch one. And he laughed and he's like, I can't catch a bird. Are you crazy? And I said, you know what? Magic things happen when you believe. And then we came up with this.
So here's a question. Are the young ladies producing any creative writing based on their experience, the photographic experience with you, or is it something else?
Okay, so I'll just flip through these quickly and then we'll get to some of the poems. Here's a poem.
You found like the shyest kids in the world, huh? That's so cute.
Can you guys see this poem? Because I've got a,
You got to put your zoom on the bottom.
what's that?
No, sometimes the
I'm
photo.
trying, well, your images are blocking my ability to read the
Karen,
poem.
we can see the poems. I can see it. It's not a problem. I can see it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
we
you
can-
can
we
read
can
it,
also-
great. So for this boy, his name's Tayu. I went to his house. He has a brother and sister in the project as well, and it was great. We had the mom and the dad made us brunch, and one of his friends was over too, and we sat around the table and I worked with them one by one. And as you can see, he's just like a 6-year-old kid saying what you would imagine. I have a lot of superpowers. I can listen to my parents. I can do parkour. I can be flexible, you know. And then all of a sudden he starts talking about Martin Luther King. And me and the dad looked at each other and we were like, whoa, you know? So to answer your question, Frank, about what are they speaking to? Are they speaking to the images? Or are they just speaking to what is moving them? Originally, I wanted them to speak to the images. That was my intention. That was my original vision. But the poems started all sounding the same. They were about playing in the water, with the sun, with the sea, feeling free, etc., which was really nice for the first one or two. But then I realized this, you know, they're giving me what they think I want. Let's open it up and let them really tell us who they are, you know. What is their imagination? What is their power? So this is an example of what happens when you let the child just go.
And that had to be magical for the parents that the kid was thinking about Martin Luther King, you know, right? I mean, like they probably, I'm sure they spoke about it, but that they were actually thinking about it, right? I mean, kids talk about things, but then where do they go with those thoughts? And this kid was obviously thinking about Martin Luther King. So they were listening at some point.
Yeah.
To their
I mean,
teachers and parents.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So this is Mackenzie. She was one of the first ones that I photographed. And she made this poem during our first workshop. I don't know why it's displaying like this. These are on panels where it's seamless, like you will see it at the park in July. It's a portrait and the poem, 70 inches wide on the wide edge and 43 inches high. So the portrait will be about 2/3 of the panel and the poem will be another third, big, and there'll be 20 panels altogether. Half of it will be facing Eastern Parkway, half of it will be facing Washington Avenue. For those who don't know, the Ronald McNair Park is right across the street from the Brooklyn Museum and where the botanical gardens are too. So it's going to get a lot of foot traffic. I think the kids are going to be really excited. This is the girl I was talking about, Yamaya, who was teaching me about Mae Jemison. So I don't know if you can read that poem. I can read it. Reading is my superpower and also a little bit of math. Missy Copeland was the first Black ballerina. Mae Jemison was the first Black woman to go to space. Mae Jemison asked the president if she could go to space, and she did, because she asked for what she wanted. Mae Jemison used her superpower of courage, creativity, and confidence. I am confident and creative too. I will use my superpower to help me read every single day. Reading every day will help me be more creative, courageous, and confident. Just like Missy and Mae, I'm going to be the first Black girl to do something great. 6-year-old.
Magical, absolutely magical.
They floored me. They just floored me. And you're right, they floored their parents too.
You know, that's a pretty interesting thought, right? That is much, I mean, as a parent, like that you can be shocked or you can be amazed because you think you know your kid so well, and then they do something that humbles you, right? I mean, that's really pretty intense for a 6-year-old, 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Very, very intense.
And I've read that to a few people, and they just couldn't believe that a 6-year-old could articulate like that. They just, but she did. And I have the Zoom, I record all the videos. So I have the proof.
Right.
My superpower is catching birds. I catch the birds before the cats catch them. I catch the birds to keep them safe. When I'm older, I'm going to be able to do a long jump. I'm going to do, see, this is, I'm sorry, guys, this is blocked for me.
Jump over a chair.
I'm going to jump over a chair. To do a long jump, you need 2 hands. To catch a single bird, you need 2 hands to catch. You only catch 1 bird per jump. And if it's on top of a vegetable garden, I can catch the bird in a very short time. My superpower is catching birds. I catch the birds to keep them safe. My name is Obi. I am friendly. I speak honestly. These are just some of my superpowers. And love is my superpower. What is love? Love is the superpower to make friends. This is love. And I have another superpower, which is that I'm magnificent. What does it mean to be magnificent? Actually, I do not know. Let's look it up. Yes, now I know. To be magnificent is to be nice, friendly, smart, and honest. This is what makes me, Obi, a champion friend maker.
Wow. I mean, this is really spending a lot of time with these kids.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, this is a lot of, I mean, there's deep thoughts in there. And I mean, all of that, that's, I mean, to your credit, you know, that you have the patience and the desire to pull this out of them. Thank God. Beautiful.
Thank you. And this is the mom and the daughter after we did the daughter's portrait. And we were just playing around, and I asked the mom if she wanted to dance because she's a dancer. So she hopped up on the ping pong table, and then her daughter joined her. And this was amazing because Leica made this their The World Deserves Witnesses campaign. They used this for that, and they blew it up 150 feet by 100 feet and put it on the wall of a hotel in Beverly Hills. And the family, the mom works for JetBlue, and so they have miles. And I had a show in LA at the Leica Gallery. So I was there, and they used their miles and they flew out there so that they could see it. And I should have put, as part of this presentation, I didn't. I have a beautiful picture of the mom holding the daughter's face right in front of this massive, massive wallscape.
Wow.
It's really breathtaking. That's it.
That is beautiful. Beautiful.
So thank you. I invite everybody to join us in the park if you're in town on July 14th.
Yeah, you know, when that's coming closer, send us the information and we'll blast it out to our audience for you.
That would be great. I would
Yeah.
appreciate that.
That's for sure. But everybody in the chat room is just loving it. If anyone has any questions, raise your hand. We'll get them. But that is really beautiful, very inspiring work. I mean, and so it continues, Karen.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I hope to actually do it potentially in other places around the world and the country, and open it up to a wider group of children, you know, children who have parents who are incarcerated, for example, is one group I'm thinking about, or, you know.
Yeah, I mean, this is
and
one of those
immigrants.
things. This
Yeah.
is one of those categories where you can teach other photographers how to do this, right? You know, through Columbia, through NYU, you know, so that it could really just, you know, explode out in that way, right? Because, you know, your MFA, I mean, all of that, you know, plays into this, which would really be, you know, the statue of Karen, right? I mean, that would really would be a park named after you. That's really great, really great. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for presenting that.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right, it's time for Ms. Ferrato.
Well, I am so moved by both of you photographers, Alyssa and KZ. I'm stunned by your work and how you came into these projects that mean so much. The very personal path you've been on. But KZ, I'm just amazed that just from the intensity of attending the protests, and you just wanted to experience some pleasure and relaxation and went to the beach. And all of this, the magic of being with the children and the birds and their parents in the sea, what it's become. And these children are extraordinary, really. Zamia, the boys, all of them.
I know. It's like they're incredible. Thank you. I'm so glad you see that.
I'm blown away, really, in the most tremendous, exciting way. And Alyssa, I'm really impressed with you as well, because to go to those places, you know, the clinics, the abortion centers, by yourself, doing it all on your own, driving, and you were protected and you were ready, but you're very forthright, and you have convictions that you're standing for. And the only thing I would say about that is I feel that there is a place for men to work with us on these stories, to be out there with us. I really feel we need more men to stand up and to be part of this fight for women's rights. It's really, it's time that they do that. We need them out there. And I think there are many, many good men who want to join us, who believe that it's a woman's right to choose. And they don't want to force anything on us. And they know that everyone will be happier if women are happy. That's the bottom line, is how can we make this world a safe place for women to have children that they love and can protect and nurture. And I see from the pictures that you've been taking, Casey, that those mothers and fathers are really, they adore their children. Your pictures are showing what it's like to raise children so that they're not fearful, so that their minds can expand and embrace all the concepts of love and freedom and justice and doing good for others. I mean, those children that are being raised, as you saw, that are going to the clinics and trying to shut everything down and intimidate people, their minds are so impressionable. They're dying right in front of your eyes, really. Their souls, it's such a contrast between the children that we see in your pictures and how we see the children in Casey's photographs on the beach. It's just, I think your projects go very well together. So, you know, I have to kind of diverge from the power of your projects, both of you. I'm so impressed. But it's been a very difficult period for me over these last 7 years, because I was born in 49, and I've always believed in a woman's right and a girl's right to think for herself and do what she chooses to do. And I was raised to think that way. And we've been out there fighting for our rights for 50 years, really. We were very successful. Abortion, the right to choose, that's a constitutional right for women. It's as much of our right as anything else that's been brought into the Constitution. So I've been very angry these last 7 or so years. And this book that I put together, it's called Holy. This is the cover that was the original cover that I actually pulled at the last minute, because I felt no one would ever, they wouldn't take it seriously. They would be too afraid of it. But we heard so many slurs against women during Trump's era. His time was just, that's when the major disrespect began. And it's just gotten worse. And so I created a second cover, which stands for the intersectionality of women. And then under here, I wrote many things, but one of the things that I wrote over and over, because I think after working on domestic violence for 40 years and living in shelters for months at a time all around the country, I realized that what women wanted was for men to change. They didn't want to put the men in prison. They didn't want to send them away forever. Many women really love the man that gave them a child. They value him. They put a lot more value into him than the men put into the women for bringing these children into the world. So I've always felt like we needed programs for batterers and for abusers to turn them around. We have to find ways to heal them, because they are very susceptible when they are criticized too much, when they struggle to have a success in life and they don't make it. They get very frustrated, they get angry. That's when they want to get their guns and they want to go out and harm people. They talk about committing suicide, but usually they end up killing a lot of people before they will harm themselves. So men are very fragile. That's how I see them. Very insecure. And women, on the other hand, can go through so much trauma, have so much pain, be put down, not allowed to really achieve so much that they know that they can do, because they have so many responsibilities on them to take care of the home, to take care of the man, to take care of the children, that they're not really able to go through life as forcefully as they could. They know that they can, so they subliminate and they sacrifice. And it shocked me, Alyssa, to hear those women just saying, I mean, even though I know it's true, it still shocks me that, no, we are the submissive ones. That's the man. If he says that we should, you know, be quiet and whatever, we have to listen to him. I commend you on your self-control, really. I wish I'd been with you on that trip, really. So what I'm going to show you are just a few pictures from the Book of Holy that I think, let's see. I'm trying to show the power of women, because I think we're going to lose it now. If they succeed in taking away a woman's right to control her reproductive systems, then it's over. We really, it doesn't matter what part of the country we live in. If there are, if half of the women in this country are controlled and are used like animals, then it's over, because how can any of us feel good knowing that other women are being treated like this? We are going to have to go there and find ways to defend them, to be beside them, to offer whatever we have, to collaborate with them. We are going to have to do more than taking pictures. We're really going to have to, we're going to have to do a whole lot more. We're going to have to become soldiers. I mean, this is a holy war, and they are taking away our rights completely, and they don't know what they're doing, because this is going to bring out the angriest, most bitter fruit from women. They will never see love from us again. It's all these things, you know, is what we are. And we're proud of it. We want to be unleashed. We want it. We, like Sojourner Truth said more than 150 years ago, ain't I a woman? A woman means everything. And men and the women who support the patriarchal foot soldiers should be very afraid of us, because we are not going to let them win this. Let's see, Fanny, let's start. Okay. Women go through such horrible things. They bring their children into the world. They have so many struggles just raising them, finding the money to buy the food, to pay for the bills. You know, many women are raising these children on their own. They don't have men who are there supporting them. So this woman, Ethere Hall Gaston, was in prison at the time that her children were burned alive in their little house with her mother, who was taking care of them. And I had read the story in the New York Times. She was in prison just for checks, like breaking into a mailbox and taking some checks. Now, she grew up with domestic violence. Her young brother actually shot and killed her father for beating on the mother. So she had so much embedded trauma in her. And yet she had many children who needed to be taken care of. And she loved them and she brought them into the world. But then because of a very corrupt landlord who had these bars on the windows, and yet nothing worked inside the little house, even though the grandmother was paying $800 a month. There was a fire one night when the grandma was heating up a bottle for the youngest child, an infant, and a fire broke out from an electrical issue, and they were heating up the baby bottle on a popcorn machine. And a great fire broke out, and there were the doors didn't have doorknobs. They had metal bars over them because of the drugs that were being sold outside in the community. And the landlord didn't do anything about that, but he did put bars on the doors and bars on the windows. So they couldn't get out. They burned alive in this house. And when Ethere heard about it, she collapsed. She was brought to the school where they had the funeral for 7 children and the grandmother. And they were all buried in 3 coffins. And when I read about this happening in this small town in Bruce, Mississippi, I was so upset that I got on a plane and flew there the day of the funeral. No magazine would publish it. None of the magazines that I worked for, Life, Time, New York, nobody was interested, because they said to me, Donna, this is not a big story. And anyway, these are poor Black people. And it made me sick to hear those words. So I went there and arrived just as Ethere was going into the gymnasium to see her children. All the women who were serving her gathered around her in their white dresses. And I had to crawl on my knees to get between their skirts so I could get this picture. I mean, you know, some people think I'm invasive. Maybe I am invasive, but I know what we have to do as photographers, as both of you know very well. Whatever it takes, we have to get in there. This was a story that was eventually published in People magazine. And I did a lot of work around interviewing the landlord, going into the church to talk to everybody, how they couldn't just accept it. They couldn't say that this was God's will. I stood up in front of the congregation and I said, this isn't God's will. These children were all studying so hard in school. They were trying to make something of themselves. Their grandmother was working in the cotton fields all the time to be able to pay the bills. It shouldn't have ended up this way. And so it's those metal bars on the windows. And then I put together a committee of women who tried to speak with the fire marshals in this town in Bruce, Mississippi, until they were able to put a group together, and they marched to Jackson, and they changed the laws. They can't put these metal bars on windows anymore in Mississippi because of this community here. This is a woman that I met very early on when I was a young photographer, and I read about her. So there was something called these stripogram girls. And so I met Nitsa, and I just started spending all my time going with her to all the places where she would dance. She brought her jukebox. I felt like she could move mankind in a way that I had really never seen. And she would go to hospitals, she would go to schools, she would go to airports, she would go to private homes. You know, the power. And then for the Book of Holy, I started to write. My captions were like this, because this is how I feel. And I had to put, you know, a lot of it in writing in the book. It's all handwritten. And as well, let's go to the next piece, Fanny. This was the night that all of my fears about what was happening to women were actualized, because I had never seen domestic violence. I didn't know that things like this really happened, but I had read the book, The Handmaid's Tale. And I also knew that there were forces that were trying to keep women down. I'd heard about these things, but I had never seen it happening, and I did not expect it with this family. I thought that Elizabeth was a very liberated woman. I thought her husband gave her all the power. And if I hadn't been living in this house for a long period of time, I never would have realized that something like this could be going on in their house. But what was fantastic was to keep going through the years with Elizabeth and her family. She left Banks, she left this man, and she set up a home. She was a professional masseuse, a healer. And she took care of her children without any support from Banks. He was a total loser. He went off. Here he was, a man who had built a house right next to Richard Nixon. He had accomplished so many things, but he was like, you know, a drug addict, number one. He'd become a drug addict. He was arrogant. He was controlling. He thought that she belonged to him and his children too. There were so many things about him that I should have seen in the beginning, but only by living in this house was I able to understand how she was being controlled. And then I saw how she became the Rock of Gibraltar, because she took care of her children. She supports her grandchildren. She's one of the happiest women I've ever met, but she came from this kind of abuse, only with that man, and she left him. That's why I also speak very strongly about the need for women to understand that if they don't get out of these relationships sooner, then somebody's going to die. Either she's going to die or he's going to die. And if she dies, she will go to prison for 3 times longer than he will.
If she kills.
If she kills him, I'm sorry. If she kills him, she will get a very heavy sentence. Whereas if he kills her, everyone will feel sorry for him. He'll make up all these stories that people want to believe. Also in the Book of Holy, I realized that I had to redesign the Bible. I mean, I couldn't, let's go to the next picture. I created a new Trinity because it's the Father, the Son, and the Ghost is not acceptable to me. So I created a new Trinity, the Mother, the Daughter, and the Other. And the Book of Holy is divided into these three parts: the Mother, the Daughter, and the Other. Those are the chapters of the Trinity. Let's go.
Donna, what made you come to that to that title and that thought?
Because women's rights are sacred. We create the world. We are the leaders of the world. I guarantee you, men would not be able to do anything if there weren't women who were there sacrificing everything that they have in them to help their man, to feel better, to accomplish things, to have something good to eat, to calm them, to love them, to give them just their bodies, their hearts, their minds. Men would not be able to accomplish anything. They would go mad. They would kill each other. We take it all on. We take the burden on. And this is all women. This is all women that I'm talking about in the Book of Holy. Let's go to this woman, Isabella Rodriguez. She has taught me so much, and I love her so dearly. And she has been through such hell in her life, and she still has the joy in her. She's even after all of the work that she's done and all of that she's suffered, she still has such a tremendous capacity to love and to work for others. And that's the work. She's got a graduate degree in literature. She's brilliant. She works now for a really important trans agency, a group in LA that finds housing for trans people and gets jobs for them, helps them to feel better, psychological support and training, and help, just love, so that they know that they are valued and they are loved and they can grow stronger. We all have to work on our sense of self-esteem. This was the dedication page for Holy. On the right side, you see this. I have a receptacle in the back here, which used to be for holy water. It's a font that we have in the bathroom. So I started shooting a lot of water at it, and my daughter and her husband were there helping me shoot water into so it would look like a storm, like a tsunami had hit it, because this is what I feel is happening, that they are destroying us. They are trying to destroy us. They are trying to turn us into slaves, really. That's what they want from women. And I think that white men, not all white men, I'm not going to say that, but a lot of white men are so insecure, and they're desperate right now. They're desperate because they've realized that a lot of white women don't want their damn babies. 60% of the aborted fetuses are white, and that's what's terrifying them, that they're going to lose their power over the rest of us, over Blacks, Browns, Indigenous. They're doing everything to just keep us down, crush us, make us live in fear, like they live in fear. So we have to keep pushing for our liberty. And what I tried to do with Holy was to show how powerful women are. Let's keep going, Fan. So many of the women that I met when I was working on Living with the Enemy were the ones who, like Janice here, her best friend was.
Wait, Donna,
Yes?
just mention that's one of your books, Living with the Enemy.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Living with the Enemy was the first book that I ever made, and it was a 10-year journey into the heart of domestic violence, and it was really activated after seeing Elizabeth being beaten in her own home and realizing that I had to do something about it, because back in the early 80s, nobody thought domestic violence was even a problem. And I couldn't get any magazines to run the pictures. So I realized that it wasn't good enough to show one woman's story. I had to go all around the country. I rode with the cops thousands of hours, and always going into people's homes explaining that I'm a photographer, I'm not with the police, getting releases from everybody that I photographed, living in shelters for months at a time, living in hospital emergency rooms, waiting for women to come in. You don't think that I felt like a ghoul? You know, I felt terrible because I was there waiting for bad things to happen, but I was very patient. I didn't really want bad things to happen. I would have been so happy if nothing ever happened, but I had to be there. If something bad was going to happen in my brain, I had to be there because I was really ready to take it on head first. Just whatever was going to be there, I wanted to see it. I wanted to document it. And I wanted people to understand how hard it is for women and children who are living in homes where they have no voices and there is no love. All the good that they want to do, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter when you're living with men who feel like they are the ultimate power, like these Christian right people think that the man is the ultimate power, like the Catholic Church says, you know, it's the Father, the Son, and the Ghost. That we know that ultimate power corrupts, and men have been corrupted by having too much power since the very beginning. I mean, what's sickening about it all is that the first person on earth was a woman, a Black woman, that in Africa. This is the known records. And we have done so much harm to women of color and indigenous women. We do not give them what they deserve, which is ultimate respect and honor. So I've just had to just keep going, you know, and also in the book, I wanted to make some points about things. So, you know, control, that women control their own bodies, that we have control, we must control. We don't look to the men to give us permission. We expect men to look to us for consent. That's it. And we have our choice. And this is who we are, we, she, and they. We are, all of us, we are this one body. This was a picture that kind of really shocked me when I was even taking it, because I had never seen a child stand up to the abuser. And this young boy, Diamond, had called the cops because his dad was attacking his mom. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when we went into this house. Very quickly, I said to the mother, I'm here with the police, but I'm working for a magazine. May I please photograph? And I promise you, I won't publish anything unless you sign a release. And she said yes. Many people say no, and I don't blame them. I totally understand. But she did say yes. And so from that point on, I was seeing everything that was happening. And what happened with the incident was that there was a screwdriver involved, and the father was very upset with her. And he did something he knew was wrong, but the police were also very intense, and they jumped on him when they had him in the bedroom. And it was an extraordinary, brutal moment. And I was just shaking. I had the flash, had to put it on the camera because even though it was daylight, the shades and the curtains were all drawn. So I was bouncing the flash into the ceiling. And as we came out into this living room before they were taking him into the police car, the boy stood in front of his father and said, "I hate you for hitting my mom. Don't you come back to this house." I couldn't even see the flash, it was like a, millimeter of a second. So I didn't see what was on the TV. I didn't see anything. I didn't see the policemen's eyes or faces. They were all so shocked. They had never seen a child. In all of their experiences answering 911 calls, they'd never seen a child who was really giving it to his father like that. Like, we have to give it to men. We can't be sympathetic to them, really. We have to understand where it comes from, but there has to be consequences for men. I went down to the police station with this man and I asked him questions about what had happened and he explained to me. Then I went back to Minneapolis and because I didn't have a model release, I went back and I spoke with the family and the wife, and the husband was back. And I feel for them. They are still together, this couple. They do love each other. The father had not been violent with her before. He had been violent 10 years ago, but he'd stopped drinking and nothing bad had happened. Something happened that day, which I don't want to go into, that made him lose his cool. And as I said to him, no matter what happens, you can't use violence. You can't threaten like that. You have to calm yourself down, take a walk. And I mean, we have to teach men and boys and girls, absolutely, because women can be violent too. We all have to police ourselves, but we have to hold the abusers accountable. And then many years later, when Diamond was about 27, I went back to look for him and met with him. And I have photographed him. He's a hairdresser now. He's a beautiful young man. Gosh, now he would probably be about 40. I like to keep in touch with people. I don't like to know them. And I'm sure both of you will be that way too. Casey, I know you're going to know these children and their parents for the rest of your life. And you will be so enriched for it. You all know that maybe you don't know. I don't know what people understand anymore. But the reason that I was able to stay sane and not become a total man killer was because I would always go to events where there were couples who loved each other and they were sexual and they were free. And so I would probably do like 2 months a year going to lifestyle convention events. And now I go to chemistry events, which is it's the oldest sex party organization in the US, really, or definitely in New York. I don't know about the US, but definitely in New York, they just celebrated their 16th birthday. And the reason I love this club, this sex group called Chemistry, is because the women do have the power and they watch out. There are always a lot of, predators that will lurk when they go to these parties, but they have people who will watch them and take them out. So these are places where women can really be who they are and feel safe and enjoy themselves sexually. And I think that's so important for us. We don't want to be dictated to by any man. We want to know what really turns us on and how can we have more of that. And so, but when I did this picture, this was for New York Magazine, I met them on the boat. This was in Sheepshead Bay. We were on a boat. There were about 100 people on this boat. And at the end of the night, the man who's one of the directors of chemistry made an announcement that there was a photographer. And if anybody felt comfortable with being photographed, and so Preston and Sarah Perry, who's an author, they came up very shyly and said that I could photograph them. And so is there another picture with this? Yeah, so this is how it started, with them being together. There were other couples around that had given their permission, but I really didn't know. These are total strangers at the time. And it was extraordinary to see how free they both were. So afterwards, I asked them some questions, and that's when they were both writers. And then Sarah told me that she had just finished a book called After the Eclipse. And if I wanted, she was having a book party and I could go to the party next week. So this is what I wanted to read to you. I met Sarah at a chemistry party on the Love Boat. And then I read her memoir, After the Eclipse, about her mother, Crystal, who was killed by a man when Sarah was 12. I was overwhelmed by Sarah's honesty, as much as her passion for making love last and for honoring her mother by focusing on joy and pleasure, despite the darkness of her story. And then Sarah told me much later, let's go to the next picture. This is Sarah, because we have a bond together now. We're very close, and she's living in Oklahoma now with Preston, but whenever she comes here, we still get together. And what she said about that first picture, can you go back to the first picture? What she said is, this moment represents my ability to be all of myself without danger or restriction. Then I wanted to share a few pictures of this extraordinary woman I met last, I think it was in September, working for a magazine that eventually didn't publish the story. But I think it's one of the most beautiful stories that I've ever done because of this woman. Her name is Liara Rue. She wrote this powerful book, The Whore of New York. She's a sex worker. She's a lady. She's the closest I've ever come to meeting a woman who's just like Audrey Hepburn. And she's very independent, very kind. And we spent 24 hours. I was there with her in the home, walking with her dog, at the party that was held at the Standard. She always surprised me. And so let's go to the next picture. So this was at the Standard, and I was just amazed at how natural she was, how open she was. And I really want people to understand that what they're trying to do by banning women's reproductive rights and by saying that we can be raped, we can be beaten, we can be held down, and we can be forced to have the babies, that you will never see women joyful like this anymore. That's the point of these pictures. If you want to take away a woman's right to choose, let's go to the next one, you will lose the dignity and the directness of a woman like Liara Rue, because we all have this in us. We all have it in us to become so strong and have that like just glow inside of us if we follow our own hearts. But we have to follow, we have to know who we are, and we have to be able to go forward like that. And Liara really gave me so much encouragement. And I really would like to see all women able to stand and be free and not care what names they want to call us, slut, whore, none of that stuff. It doesn't matter. Those are just ridiculous names. Now, and they don't mean anything. We're so powerful. That's what we have to hold on to. Now, this last piece is something new for me. I applied for the mayor's office last November, sent out a call for artists to give them an idea of what they would do if they were to create something around the criminalization of survivors of violence. And so I wrote a long paper, and I said that I wanted to create the wall of silence because I've lived in the prisons with women who killed in self-defense, and most of these women, when they kill in self-defense, the courts come down very harshly on them. They don't want to know about their history of abuse. They don't want to know what it took for them to survive it. They're not interested. Even today, I started this work in women in prison back in 1990, and it's still as bad, if not worse, today. So there's too much silence there's too much ignorance about it. And so I wanted to create something that would force people to live the way they are being forced to live. So I described this, and this is what it's going to be. And it will look like this, but it's been engraved through dry transfer onto a large piece of mirrored steel. It's 7 feet by 4.5 feet. And it's encased in it's like a steel armature around this sculpture piece. And the mayor's office is behind it. The Arts and the Parks Commissioner is behind this. This is going to be installed and unveiled in the Collect Pond Park, which is downtown. It's between the criminal courts, and it's between the criminal courts and the family courts. The family courts are controlled by the fathers' rights groups. It is impossible for women to really defend their children who are being assaulted or beaten, sexually abused. It's impossible. The courts will not honor the children's words. They will not honor the mothers. They will only give support to the abusers. And I am not making this up. This is a huge problem in our country, as it is all over the world. So that's the point, is to show this, and people will stand in front of it, and this is going to be a portal into the prisons. You're going to be transported through this mirrored prison cell door, but you'll come out on the other side, and that's the intersectionality, because it's predominantly people of color, women of color, who are experiencing the worst criminalization sentences. And this is a focus on what they are going through. So
How long will that be up, Donna?
that'll
And
be
when?
up for 6 months.
6
6
months.
months.
And when is the opening? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, it's June 25th. It's happening. I'm going to be flying out to Denver in a couple weeks, getting a big U-Haul and then driving back to New York, and we're going to install it.
It's being produced in Denver.
Yeah, because that was the only place I could find someone who's really talented, a woman who's worked with steel, and she's fabricating it, and she's the best. She's like the best in the country that I could find.
What's her name?
Her name is Amanda Wilshire.
Well, that's another thing. When that's happening.
Okay, no, you're gonna hear, we're putting the press release together, and then my dearest friend, who was my best friend for the last 45 years, Margie Suhu Lee, who lives in Denver, she's the architect for it. So we've all been working together on this for the last 5 months. I mean, it's really exciting. I can't wait to share it with all of you.
Yeah, well, you certainly have to let us know. If anyone has any questions, Jay, you can unmute everybody now. I mean, what an incredible night of presenters. My God, you guys took us to every different place. It's funny, thinking of that little boy in Minneapolis. I know that photograph so well, and thinking, if he had the opportunity to show his superpower, what would that be like?
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, he was a Superman for that moment, right?
He was a Superman at that moment, absolutely. and he's become but he's a hairdresser. And he said he always loved making women look beautiful. He was the little boy when he was 8, and that's when I met him. He was always doing his mama's hair and his auntie's hairs and all the women who would come over to the house. He loved making women look beautiful. And he did not grow up to be an abuser, like many people said, oh, look what he's going through. His father was really a good gentleman too. I just happened to walk into their house at a unusual moment, and it was because Diamond called the police that I was there. Only because of Diamond. I mean, I don't think that I know that wasn't going on in their house all the time. So I do feel badly that they have been somewhat stigmatized by it, and it's probably hard for the mother to see this picture. I know it's hard for her, but in a way, this picture is bigger than all of us, because so many people have been able to understand what children feel from looking at this picture. That's what we try to accomplish, right? That's what we're all trying to accomplish, is to create photographs that have another superpower that's way beyond anything that we could have ever imagined. We want our pictures to have those wings, the wings of birds. We want them to be able to keep flying around the world, decade after decade. We don't want things to be banned like these, ridiculous right-wing supremacists who are so insecure, and they want to have everything banned, everything that's beautiful and truthful and real. They want to take away all our rights, but they want their rights to have the guns and to walk in the streets with their guns and be able to shoot anybody if they're white, not if they're black. They don't let even the NRA won't support any black gun owners, who have permits. It's just so much hypocrisy going on right now.
I have to say, you three women are probably the shyest three I've ever met. I mean, you took all these issues head on, right? Really brought us into each of these categories, each of these spaces that is so rewarding, that you feel smarter just listening to the three of you, and inspired. Really phenomenal, really phenomenal. And everybody
I love you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, more of a comment. I'd like to thank Donna. Even for a while, I've been a fan for years, and it really sometimes, at some point goes beyond artwork. It becomes, I've been your life has become an influence on how I live my life, and just value wise. And I'd like to thank you. And days like this, when I see your artwork and see Alyssa's, meet other people's, and just see like-minded folks, sometimes it reminds me of why we do what we do. I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you for your work and everything. Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Karen. It's such beautiful work, and very gratifying today just to see, see everybody's work.
I have to say that I echo those words, and as you all know, I know Karen and Donna have, and Alyssa, you guys have all presented before, so there's always a standing invitation as these projects continue on in the next one and the next one. But just, thank you so much. You've like I said, just completely inspiring. And and if you read through the chat room, you'll see. And Sari, just so you know, all these will be on the Projections YouTube channel, so you can see. Sari came in late, and so yeah, all these presentations will be on our
Thank you, Frank.
YouTube channel.
Thank you. I am so bummed to have missed it. I wanted to see you guys. You all are my favorites, my friends, and I'm so bummed. I had to do a photo shoot, but I will absolutely watch the recording.
This was a magical night. It was really terrific. So I can't thank you guys enough. Just one little piece of business. Next week, we're doing 4 nights of work from photographers in Ukraine covering the Ukrainian war. So if you want to see what's going on the ground, then tune in. You'll get email blasts. But you guys were just phenomenal. I mean, like each one of you, like you have nuggets that will stay with everyone. From the beach to that woman with the cross, the rosary beads. I mean, these are striking moments. And listening to Donna, Donna, I have to say, you were almost like putting a needle on a record. Like it just goes. Like there's no place to interrupt you. I mean, you go right into like my next question. Just beautiful, really great. You guys did a wonderful job. And I'll Alyssa, if you want any closing comment, then Karen and Donna.
I just wanted to say thank you to you, Frank, for putting this together. I'm glad that great minds think alike. We're already stewing, and it just was such an immense honor to share with Karen and Donna. Both amazing. I felt a little imposter syndrome being here, so so thank you for giving me the space and ability to share with such other powerful women.
Great. KZ? Now it's KZ. I didn't know that.
It was KZ before Karen became a dirty word, but now I'm more insistent about it though.
Okay.
No, what a beautiful night, Frank, Donna, Alyssa. Like, oh, I feel really open, even though the news has been so oppressive. I feel really like just hearing all the presentations and what you all had to say and the questions as well. Like people are engaged, like we have big hearts and we have to stick together and we have to get loud, as Donna said. And I feel so grateful, what a wonderful platform you've created, Frank and Jay. Thank you. And thank you everybody who showed up.
Yeah, no, great.
Thank you for the beautiful presentation.
All right, and Donna, we're going to give you the last word.
Let's just disrupt the silence. Let's get out there. Let's go together. I'm happy to go with you. Alyssa, I'll take a road trip with you anytime to these places. And we will give them hell. We'll take the picture.
Okay, I'm down for it.
Go crazy. We'll show how ugly they get when they have the camera in their face. We'll keep shooting, we'll just do it. Let's do
If
it.
you go with Donna, you need body armor. That's all I would suggest.
I